Hello there, it's Bruce Wallace from Dundee and Victoria Chess Club in Bonnie, Scotland, and I'm bringing my final part of Jacob Aagaard's performance to win the British Chess Championship in 2007, Jacob being Scotland's newest Grandmaster. And I haven't shown all the games, but this is the last game, and Jacob Aagaard had to win this to be in with a chance of winning, and he did, because his opponent, apart from being beaten here, the other player who was attempting to win could only draw, and therefore Jacob was outright winner. Flear here played d4, and this gave Jacob a chance to play his favourite NimzoIndian defence, and this is the classical variation, which means if black takes the knight on c3, it doesn't lead to double pawns on the c-file. Castles, a3, black exchanges off the bishop for the knight, queen takes, b6, bishop g5, bishop b7, e3, d6, knight e2, knight to d7 now, queen d3, rook e8. Now, black doesn't worry about this pin on the knight here, and is very patient. Puts up with the pin because he knows he can get rid of the bishop eventually. Knight c3, queen e7, taking a step actually towards the bishop, and this is quite unnerving for white, because if a white player has a knight pinning, a bishop pinning that knight, he expects it to produce some pressure, but black just ignores it and carries on. Bishop e2, and this involves a pawn sacrifice. Black doesn't take the g-pawn immediately. First of all, he plays h6, the bishop goes back here, then the bishop takes the pawn. Now, white has intended this because once the rook moves to g1, it forces the bishop to move back to b7, and now there is an open file directed towards black's king. So white intends to go all out for a kingside attack here. First of all, he castles queenside, then knight f8, then f4, and then Aagaard opens up in the centre here. And remember, he's a pawn up here, pawn takes, and instead of taking back the pawn, which is quite dangerous, he moves the rook to f1. So he's got both rooks here coming down, and the queen coming in. So it looks quite dangerous for black here, but Aagaard has it under control. First of all, he plays knight to h7, and then white plays d5, then e4, which nudges the queen here. Queen goes to d4, and then Aagaard moves his king out of the line of the rooks, and then knight to b5. Aagaard plays rook a to d8. Now here, white could have taken the pawn on a7, and in fact my search engine suggests that this is almost 2-pawn advantage to white, winning the pawn back but also having an attack. But Flear doesn't play that. After rook a to d8, he plays bishop g3, and this involves a brief tactical flurry, which leads to Aagaard giving up the exchange. But he must have calculated it, because Aagaard can now play c5 attacking the queen, and the d-pawn can't take back au passant because the rook would take the queen, so it's queen c3, and now Aagaard plays a positional piece sacrifice, or offered sacrifice, with bishop takes d5. If pawn takes, knight takes, forcing the queen to move, and then it's knight g5, and black has a really dominant position. He is 3 pawns for the exchange of the piece, but totally dominates the board, and his pieces are centralised. So it's not a good idea after bishop takes d5 for white to take. Instead, white plays knight c7, and this involves Aagaard in giving up the exchange, but it's obviously been planned. He plays bishop c6, then the knight can take the rook, then knight takes back, rook to d1. Aagaard doesn't give back his only rook. Bishop f4, f6, and it's a very strong position the king has now. It doesn't appear to be easy to break through in any way. Knight f8, bishop takes, rook d6, and although white looks a bit threatening here, he really doesn't have anything for the exchange here. knight to e6, and this knight plays an excellent role in both attack and defence. Bishop g3, knight g5, h4, knight back to f7, attacking the rook. Rook comes back to d2, bishop d7, bishop f4, h4, and this will provide a support point for the bishop on when it comes to g4, blocking the file. Rook d5, bishop g4. So black's king is completely safe now, and black can methodically improve his position. Rook g2, king g8, b4, c takes, queen e8, and the queen is threatening to come in now on the queen side to harass white's king, which is what in fact happens. King b2, then rook c8, c5, a5 now, and queen d4. Pawn takes, and now queen b5 check, and the black queen now harasses the life out of white's king. King c3, queen f1, and if the queen takes the pawn here with queen takes e4, you've got a skewer on all three pieces here. A skewer here forcing the queen to come to e6, but once rook ft8, black can take either rook at his leisure. After queen h1, in fact, white moved the rook to b2, then bishop e6, so always threatening to win back the exchange here, and white has no check here on d8 because the rook merely takes because of the knight playing an excellent defensive role, but the queen now takes the pawn, and now black continues to harass with queen c1 check, rook c2, queen here, check, king goes to d2, and now finally black takes back the exchange, queen takes, and it's a huge advantage now. Rook d8 threatening the queen, bishop must come in and block, otherwise the queen dropped because it was pinned, queen check, king here, and now black's passed pawn begins to advance. The rook comes to here, and now black snaffles the other hanging pawn on the h-file, and black has two passed pawns on either wing. e4, queen g4, king here, and now the other pawn begins to advance. Rook a3, and now h3, and this pawn looking very dangerous. Queen a2, rook e8, queen back to e4, queen g1 check, king to c4, and now the pawn comes to h2, and white has to give up a piece in order to stop it queening. Queen takes, and really it's all over now. Rook takes a4, queen check, king b4, and rook to b8 check, and white resigns. If it's already a piece down, if the king goes to c6, the queen just takes the rook with check, and if the king goes here, queen b2, and black is mating. So an impressive performance by Aagaard there. In quick overview of the game and a summary, it was an NimzoIndian defence, classical variation, and Aagaard fianchetted on the queen side, and then ignoring the pin, offered the g-pawn for sacrifice. After nudging the bishop, black took back, rook to g1, and then castled. Black methodically played to develop his pieces, opened up the centre, and despite white looking to have dangerous attacking chances, black defended patiently, and after this move, instead of the advantageous knight takes e7, equalising and actually gaining a big advantage, white played bishop g3, which allowed this move by black, which gave up the exchange for two pawns, but with a very strong position, and gradually ground white down to a situation where black's queen came in to harass and won back the exchange, and then used his passed pawns on both wings to force the exchange of a piece until White was forced to resign because his position was absolutely hopeless. And a very impressive display. Glenn Flear, by the way, outgraded Aagaard, not significantly, but he was still higher rated. And it capped off a brilliant performance by Aagaard, who won the British Championship outright. And I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot more of him in the future. See you soon on YouTube.